You know, back when I was in the academy, we would follow every toast with a song.
Okay, so we're back. Welcome everyone to another episode of Where No Bubs Has Gone Before. This is Star Trek Season 1, Episode 20, Heart of Glory, which debuted on March 21st, 1988, with a star date of 41503.7, of course. This is a truncated episode. If you saw this last episode, you know why we're doing this, so this will be a little bit shorter. As always, I have my guest with me, my co-host, and my father, Jake. How are you doing tonight, Dad?
I'm good, Jay.
So, I think this will actually be a much shorter episode than planned, just because it's a very basic episode, and I think in many ways it's one of the first episodes of this season where it really is only one storyline.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
And it's very, very compact.
Yes.
But it is, we should note, the first big Klingon episode of the show. We really get into Worf.
Right.
We really get into, current Klingon culture post the original cast movies, which at this point I think we're definitely past The Search for Spock, where I believe Christopher Lloyd played the Klingon captain.
He did, yes.
In that.
He did a very good job playing the Klingon. Yeah.
Yes, he did. Killed David, Kirk's son.
That's right.
What do you think of this episode? Because I think what we're going to talk about a lot here is just the depiction of Klingons.
I think that's the key thing. As you say, it's a very tight episode. I was going to say it's sort of unique in season 1 that there's one storyline. The Enterprise, saving these
Talarian fighters.
These two Klingons.
Well, three. Originally
three. Actually, three. There's one is severely injured who, once they get on the Enterprise, Dr. Crusher cannot save and dies.
Where we first see the inaction of the Klingon death ritual, where
they
will open up dead warrior's eyes, look into it, and then scream towards the heavens, basically announcing, beware, beware, a Klingon warrior has entered Sto-vo-kor.
But I think it probably more importantly, it does give us a more insight into Klingon culture, their warrior ethic, their warrior culture. But I think it's very interesting in that it's sort of like a roots episode for Worf, because he was very young when he was saved by a human Starfleet officer
at the Khitomer massacre.
At Khitomer, and then he was raised in a human society, not around Klingons. But it seems apparent that his parents supported him in having him understand his theory from reading and so forth, what Klingon culture was about, but he has never really experienced it. So when he's exposed to the two healthy Klingons, Commander Korus and Lieutenant Kamel, they kind of challenge him, whether he has that warrior fire about him and so forth. And he finds that he does. And I think that's really the most important thing of the episode, that it just, not the most important, but one, more detail about Klingon warrior culture, but secondly, it allows Worf to kind of get in touch with his roots.
Well, I think there's a very interesting interplay here, because what happens is that the Enterprise comes upon this Talarian freighter that's been damaged in a battle, and they discover all the Talarians on board have been killed, but there's these, of course, 3 Klingon warriors, and then one of them dies. The interesting thing that causes Korus and Kamel to leave the Empire, because we later find out that they actually tried to take this freighter and are on the run from the Klingon Empire, they want to go and live as pure Klingons out, I guess, in space or wherever the Klingon frontier is, and try to live a life, built on this idea that we're going to be warriors, we're going to fight, we're going to take part in combat, we're going to find glory. When Worf finally confronts Chorus, when Chorus is the last surviving Klingon by the end of the episode, because the crew discovers that they actually tried to take the Talarian fighter, Chorus tells the Worf, he's not a true warrior because he's not standing with his fellow Klingon against the enemies of what he perceives to be the definition of Klingon. Worf says that the greatest battle is not actually outside for Klingons, it's actually within, and the greatest battle for warriors is within. And I think this places two very interesting things that Star Trek will deal with when it comes to Worf. Worf is our window into Klingons, and will remain our window into Klingons through Star Trek The Next Generation, Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And one thing that you and I have talked about previously on this show is that there's a fan theory that the Klingon Empire is actually a culture in decline. And I think you see parts of that here, where, you have people who are trying to break away from, a version of Klingon society that they think is corrupted by the ideas of peace and interstellar commerce and all these other things that, the Klingons really do benefit from. They benefit from a relationship with the Federation, especially against their racial enemies, the Romulans, as at least the Klingons seem to frame it. From what we saw at the end of Season 4, beginning of Season 5, with the Civil War, where Gowron fights off against the Duras with, again, Worf's help, what do you think of this idea that the Klingon civilization is kind of in downfall?
I don't think it's in downfall, because it goes to the conversation that the commander of the Klingon battlecruiser at the end, I don't think I have his name anywhere. No, I don't. But when he, comes up, when the Enterprise notices that there's another vessel approaching and it's a Klingon battlecruiser, and the commander of that ship ends up talking to Picard, and at the very end they say that, the commander talks to Worf after Chorus and Comel had basically, been killed in combat and so on. And Worf, kind of pleads for them, to not be executed, because he understands what they're trying to do. They want to have the warrior culture still. And the commander of the battlecruiser understands that and sort of agrees with it. But at the same time, he has to take them in because he's, following orders, and they would be executed in not a very nice way, not an honorable way. And it gets into that one statement that you read where Worf says to them, to Chorus and Comel, about it is the weaknesses within that the Klingon warrior must overcome.
Yeah.
And it sort of reminded me, it reminds me a little bit of the Islamic concept of jihad, that it's not really, jihad as a holy war, but the primary meaning of jihad, as I understand it in Islam, is the struggle within oneself to join with Allah, to follow, the precepts of Islam and so forth. And I don't think the Klingon Empire is necessarily in decline based on the information in this episode, because the Empire realizes that, what Chorus and Comel want to do is basically they don't accept the Klingon Federation alliance. It thinks it limits them, it weakens them. They can't, they can't act out their warrior impulses and so forth. But the battlecruiser's been sent to bring Chorus and Comel back for their crimes. And that seems to me, it gives an indication that the Klingons have value in the alliance, and that they realize that they can still keep their warrior culture in some way, but they have to change.
Yes. Very well put. One thing that I have to say that they do to really make the Klingons seem very capable as antagonists. So when Chorus and Kamel are finally captured and put in the brig, they literally, from parts of their uniform, basically reconstruct a
crude phaser.
A crude disruptor.
Yeah.
Yeah, a Klingon disruptor. I thought the actual, like, end scene of them, like, escaping the brig all the way to Worf's confrontation in the engine room was very well done.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was... I think this episode's very good in terms of how well it's paced, and how there are like real ups and downs in it, but that last sequence is all very exciting. And I think that this is a very good episode. I think it does a lot for Worf, because I think up until this episode in season 1, there really hadn't been a lot of attention paid to him.
Correct.
And I think, you know, one thing that I'm very excited to see in Star Trek Picard Season 3, since we know the entire cast is coming back from Next Generation, I love Michael Dorn. I think Michael Dorn's one of the best actors that the show ever had. There's a reason he was cast for so long as that character. I really want to see where the Worf character is by the time we get to Picard Season 3. I want to know the end of this character, because this is, to me, one of the best characters in Star Trek. But, you know, the beautiful thing about The Next Generation is that all these characters are so iconic.
Right.
But as a episode to introduce Worf, I think that this is very, very good.
It is. It really is.
Dad, I think that's it. I know it's a much shorter episode.
It is, because it's so concise.
But,
yeah.
Any final thoughts?
No, I think we've covered it pretty well.
Okay, well, everyone, thank you for joining us for these truncated episodes. These will, of course, be posted along with the rest of Season 1, and we'll see you again soon for the rest of the seasons. Thanks, bye.